Abyss really upset TNA management at last week's TV tapings, leading to TNA pulling all offers from the table for a contract renewal. He showed up the afternoon of the tapings, pointed out that his contract expired last fall without them noticing, and he felt it was time for a raise. Sources say he told them that WWE had an offer on the table for him, and to keep him from taking that offer, they'd have to double his pay from $500 per show to $1,000 per show, which seems a pretty reasonable request.
I mean, considering he's a guy who, kills himself for you too.
He's a guy who will throw himself in thumbtacks for you at a moment's notice. TNA's policy is pay what you have to in order to keep talent, and since Abyss has no previous national exposure and no star power outside of TNA, of what TNA has done to promote his character, they didn't feel pressure to pay him as much as other main eventers in TNA who have more name recognition. TNA management, trying to keep the budget low since the promotion continues to lose money, spent a couple hours discussing the situation, but eventually they gave in and offered Abyss the raise. They gave him exactly what he asked for, like $1,000 per show. However, rather than accepting the offer, sources say Abyss said he had to go to talk to WWE about it and think about it first. Within seconds, TNA management, so offended that he didn't accept what they felt was a generous offer immediately on the spot, pulled the offer from the table and sent him home. Abyss was working to work the taping as scheduled. He also, if he was leaving, he was willing to put people over on the way out. But TNA management didn't want to give Abyss any more leverage in negotiations since his slated match for the pay-per-view against Jeff Hardy hadn't been promoted yet. This is an impasse with one of... It's weird to talk about Abyss as a top guy because he's only ever really been a mid-card guy at this stage, right?
Yeah, he's always been floating around that top guy position, but he hasn't had the big push yet. Or really, to be honest, he hasn't even had the character that he will be known for yet.
Yeah, they've been teasing the James Mitchell thing, but they have yet to pull the trigger on that. They've been teasing that for the best part of 3 months. And he's never quite been in the main event scene. He's always flirted with it and bumped up against it. Like he'd work a feud with AJ, but then never move into title matches. But yeah, this is like a fun what if moment. That what if Abyss jumped here? What if he did go to WWE? Because there was rumors of him even working Undertaker this year. That's what was potentially on the table.
How insane! Is the idea of 2004/5 Abyss working the Undertaker.
Well, when you think about the match he had in April 05 is arguably the best match of his career against AJ.
You know what? You're not wrong there.
So imagine in April 05, WrestleMania might have been March that year, drop him in there against Undertaker instead.
I really wish I had multi-dimensional viewing powers. Because I want to see what that was.
It would be pretty cool. See what kind of career Abyss would have had. It might have been the case they would have said, "Oh, we're thinking about you for an Undertaker match, but also we're sending you to developmental instead." That could have easily happened. In fact, I would say it's almost more likely that would have happened.
Well, what was the Taker match that year?
Was that Randy 05?
It seems like it was Randy.
Which was a very good match, that Randy match.
I haven't seen it. I've seen 3 WrestleManias ever.
And there was a moment in that match where Randy hits the RKO, and the streak is a thing at that stage, but not...
It's not drilled into your head yet. I feel honestly, it's weird that I feel like the streak doesn't really become a selling point as a major thing until the Batista match.
I almost go I don't even think it's a selling point by the Batista match, is it? Does Batista talk about wanting to end the streak? Because the Batista match is a title match.
Yes, but I think that was the first time where you started seeing the number being bandied around a lot more. You know what I mean? Even if that wasn't the explicit purpose of the angle or the build to the match, it was a part of it at that point. It was it was starting to build it up to that legacy where then eventually it would become the only build for the matches at Mania.
Because I think Randy was the point where people most thought Undertaker was going to lose, because Randy was doing the legend killer shtick at that stage. He was a young guy. He was probably, if you were to actually have somebody beat the streak, if you were to look back on all the streak matches, Randy probably should have been the one to do it, but also they milked the shit out of that thing for another decade anyway, so...
I'm not the Undertaker guy, but, the streak is by far one of the strongest things they've ever had.
One of their best angles that they stumbled upon it by accident, as they always do. I wonder what the point was where they were like, oh, he has never lost at WrestleMania.
I'm sure it was pretty early on.
Mm.
Like, but I don't know if that was like a let's keep doing it thing. I think like they got like 6 in and they're like, oh, that's a fun little fact.
So Abyss was quite torn, apparently, in that he was a little offended that they didn't even notice his contract had come up.
Fair.
But also he felt a degree of loyalty to TNA, both because Dutch Mantel was one of the people who gave him his break in Puerto Rico, and TNA were the people that gave him his break in America. So, like, part of him wanted to stay, but then part of him felt slighted that, like, they moved heaven and earth to re-sign AMW when those deals came up. They're like, we'll give you a title run, we'll give you a pay rise, and then when Abyss's deal comes up, nobody even notices.
You know what? If Dusty had got his full control and fucking Mantel was one of the guys who was out, he probably would have just gone.
Yeah. So when Jarrett told Dusty Rhodes about all this, about the contract coming up and Abyss being on the fence and the thing about them being like, we're going to pull the offer because you want to go talk to, that's fucking bullshit. Fuck off with that shit.
Yeah, that's like stupid wrestling logic that would never apply to real life stuff.
Trying to pressure the man into signing a deal when he could potentially have a much better deal on the table is carny bullshit, and you can fuck right off.
Yeah.
But when Dusty was told they made it, they even though Abyss agreed the job on the way out, they made the decision to pull him off TV. Again, likely to reduce the leverage he'd potentially have on the way out, which I guess makes a degree of sense.
Also, like, you know, killing any recent exposure to. Like, hope people forget by the time he gets there.
Yeah, they did ever so slightly begin building to what was meant to be a TLC, or the first Full Metal Mayhem match, at the pay-per-view, where there was a kind of almost post-credits coda at the end of one of the episodes where you saw Abyss drop a table on a man and scream. You couldn't quite make out that it was Jeff Hardy, but I'm pretty sure it was Jeff Hardy. And that was meant to build toward a match, but then they had this contract impasse, and also Jeff Hardy missed an impact because he missed the taping through bad means, not good means. He just no-showed it. So it's been a tumultuous month for even Jeff Hardy, because they took the Abyss match off the show, put it back on, and then took it back off again when Abyss had his contract issues. So it's been a roller coaster ride of this Abyss and Jeff Hardy feud. But Abyss and the company came to terms on the 11th of January, but it was kept a secret from everybody. It is believed he got the raise he asked for, and then it does beg the question just how much interest WWE actually had in him. And again, I think if Vince did look at Abyss, who is a big guy, but he's not like a jacked lean guy.
He's also not like a giant either.
Because, like, if his shoot height is, I think, about 6'5", which by any standard is a giant, but in wrestling it's not.
Yeah, it's just like a big dude. It's like Mike Awesome when he went to WCW, and you're like, oh, you're just like pretty big.
So they did the classic TNA thing where they kept it a secret because they wanted the big surprise when Abyss walked out at the end of the Jeff Hardy-Scott Hall match on the pay-per-view and attacked Jeff Hardy, hit him with the shock troop and hit him with the Black Hole Slam. And Mike Tenay and Don West were like, he doesn't even work here. Never mind it, but he's not booked. What's he doing here? But not even Scott Hall knew about that. And Scott Hall was pissed because it was his match that it was happening after. And fair enough, Scott had already cleared the ring. But yeah, it's just the classic wrestling bullshit. Keep secrets from people for no particular reason. Then it's shocking. It will work the boys.
But it's like, I don't know, how many people who bought that pay-per-view were like, oh man, Abyss is out the door. And how many were just like, oh, Abyss does attack Jeff Hardy, so that like he doesn't work here line was probably lost on 70% of the people watching.
Yeah, again, it's the classic other Raw wrestling issue of this isn't a story on the show. And like in the internet age, it's less of a problem because it would get around a lot further that Abyss would be on the way out. Like in 2022, I think the number of people in that building and that bought these shows that would have known that Abyss was at a contract impasse would have been higher. But in 2004, it's just people in the Torch and the Observer. And like, that's a tiny number of people. And you're doing a whole angle about it and a whole secret like return around it. It's like, cop yourselves on that.
Yeah. Doesn't make a ton of sense.
Also, just tell Scott Hall about it. He's in the match.
Sure.
Let the man in the match know the angle that's going to happen after the match. I think that's a fair thing you should do to people.
Like, just give him, like, the Iggy. Like, you don't have to tell him everything. To be like, hey, after this, Abyss is going to do a run-in.
Yeah. So, Abyss staying, not leaving.
Well, it's good because we get that AJ match.
Indeed.